Hello and good morning, guys. This is a pretty cool video I found today. This is about technology and tipping points, and yeah, we're gonna talk about this today a little bit and watch this video. This is 15 minutes long. I've never seen this channel before. It is called Big Think and Free Think. And the video is called Why 2025 is the single most pivotal year in our lifetime. It's about technology and that we're at the tipping point of something greater, that a lot of things were going to change for us. And yeah, we're going to check it out together and see how it is. I'm going to make it a little louder. Here we go. Let's see.
We're in an extraordinary moment in history. We are at a moment here in 2025 where we have world historic, game-changing technologies now starting to scale. But America and the world itself are going through huge contortions. And
yeah, what would be think about what would happen if there wouldn't be any contortion, right? Well, I've never heard that word before, by the way. Wouldn't be any crises. If we would have if everything would flourish at the moment, would we go through this process much faster? And would we be able to, make these technological advancements much faster? Probably so, right?
And there's been 3 previous junctures where Americans have found themselves in this exact place. And the key piece of this is tipping points. When do you go from the slow build of a thing that's kind of clunky and not really work?
These Nokia phones were, by the way, super cool. I just want to say that real quick. I had one myself. They were omega durable. They never broke. They were omega good. And you could play Snake on it.
And do you all of a sudden get an iPhone that goes, holy shit, this is the most amazing thing in the world, and then everybody needs them. And what I'm trying to tell you now is we are in the middle of 3 tipping points that are
artificial intelligence, clean energy, bioengineering. Okay, clean energy, obviously, I'm a huge fan. You guys know that. Bioengineering, that would be awesome as well if we could with that CRISPR thing and we could change DNA and we could, get rid of all illnesses. Imagine getting rid of everything that makes us sick. That would be super awesome. And artificial intelligence, we're at the very beginning of this. I don't think we're at a tipping point there at all, to be honest.
World historic changes that are happening around us today. I'm Pete Leiden. I've basically been following the story of technology and its evolution and looking ahead into how it's going to change the world over the next 25 years.
Peter Leiden. I've never heard that name. Do you guys know Peter Leiden?
Way back in the 90s, in the earliest days of the internet, there was really only one place in the world that was really all over that, and that was Wired magazine. And it was in those early days that the founders of Wired picked up on me as someone who had the same kind of sensibility about the transformative nature of these technologies. And so they wooed me to work with them in the early days of Wired. Now, people had no idea.
So he wrote for Wired magazine. I've never read Wired, but I assume he was a writer for Wired magazine. And now he is obviously somebody who knows the advancements of technology really well. I've never heard the name Pete Leiden. Maybe you guys know him.
What was even going on with the internet, and literally what's email, what's the web? They had no idea how these goofball startups with names like Amazon were ever going to amount to anything. And the other thing that was going on there beyond this digital revolution was essentially the beginning of globalization. And so myself and my co-author, which was Peter Schwartz, wrote a famous, iconic cover story at Wired that was called The Long Boom. And it was a history of the future, the story from 1980, which is in our past, to 2020, which was in our future, trying to explain what was really coming.
And that was accurate? Question
now,
mark?
Those of us who are in technology, and those of us who have been immersed in it, which I have been for most of my career now, can see clearly these kind of incremental stages of these new technologies, that all successful new technologies go through a technology adoption curve. Let's say like Uber, the idea oh my God, instead of a taxi, it's all on your phone. And then all of a sudden, when enough people show how amazing it is, boom, boom, the entire crew moves over. And the old system of the taxi system is gone. So you're watching an old system being essentially dismantled or having to come down at the same time as we're taking off on these new technologies to build the next systems. We're in the middle of that. Right now is smack in the middle of that in our era. But we've also seen this in American history before. There's been 3 previous junctures where Americans have found themselves in this exact place. Now, that's not to say it's common.
Okay.
You know, this is 80 years ago, the last time we saw this. And they tend to come in these 80-year cycles. But what's amazing about these things is they have bursts of unbelievably widespread innovation that last for 25 years. The last big one was coming off World War II, 1945. 80 years ago, America was on a very similar parallels. We basically were watching the essentially dismantling of the old world that had been working pretty well, the economy and societies of the West. And then there'd been a crash, and you run into the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now, what that was the old system of running the economy just wasn't working. And so what happens is you watch these junctures in American society.
Yeah, okay. I don't really understand, like, where he's going with this, to be honest. I understand that when you're in a Great Depression, and when the economy doesn't work, and when people are unhappy, then, you know, like fascists like Hitler can, you know, grab power because they look somewhere else, because they don't want to be in that bad place, of course, and they look for an alternative. And when somebody comes along, like, you know, Hitler, then he promises things, and then they just fall for it, or a lot of people fall for it, and then it's at some point it's too late, right? Because they will not give up on power, and then you run into something like the Second World War, of course, which was the perfect storm. But I don't know where he's going with this right now.
We get super polarized. For example, there was an America First movement in the 30s. We were on the verge of violent conflict in America. And then you had the FDR and the kind of New Deal coalition that came out of the Depression, and they started to get traction. But anyhow, we had to resolve this political tension in America. And frankly, it had to do it in the world, because the world also is going through this juncture. And so from 1945 to 1970, we watched the great post-war boom. Many people call it the high point of global capitalism. And you built this crazy economy where you did many things that were completely different than the previous era. Tax the rich at 90%. You watched incredible investment in public infrastructure like the interstate highway system and building suburbs. You basically watched the GI Bill.
Crazy that this is actually how it worked, right? Like there was so much money coming in also from rich people, and everybody was just participating in society, and then we just changed that. We just changed that. And I think maybe we're actually at that point again where it changes back again, hopefully at some point, you know? Where everybody pays their fair share to make everyone's life a little better.
In education, building institutions for higher education, expanding it for the boomers. That all happened in 25 years. The Great Society, the whole thing, 25 years. And then we ran in the 70s. It started kind of getting long in the tooth. Stagflation, oil shocks. But here's the point. Old system had to come down. Super conflict around it, and ultimately the building of a thing that was dramatically different than before. We've been through that before. And funny enough, like I say, if you go another 80 years back, we did it again.
Gilded Age. Okay, about this one, I have no clue.
It's 1865. What is 1865? It's the end of the American Civil War. Now, this is a good example of how passions run very high and political conflict is extreme at these junctures. In the Civil War, it was the most extreme. I mean, we literally had to have 750,000 Americans.
But that basically means that it always happens after a war, right? Like after we go through crises. And that we are going through crises right now. This is not a fully blown world war, but there is war everywhere, right? And we are like in crisis mode at the moment, for sure. So maybe he's not like wrong, I guess. Maybe there's a pattern. I'm not quite sure.
Died in the Civil War. America, since the founding, had been in tension with these two economic systems. One was essentially a system of the early manufacturing economy where you needed free labor in the North. But in the old South, we basically had slavery. And they said, no, We're not going there. We're not going to give it up. We're not going to let go of this old system. We're going to fight to the death on the thing. And so this is a good example. Anyone rooted in the old systems that are going down are passionately want to defend that at all costs. Now, the thing that people do not know about the Civil War, or don't really remember as much about the Civil War, is the Civil War after 1865 had an unbelievable explosion of progress. That lasted for, what do you know, 25 years. For example, the Homestead Act, which is you gave anybody who went out west 150 acres for free. There was also land.
There is a pattern, right? Like, there is a pattern with people who want to defend like an old system and they just want to hang on to it. And there are more people usually that want to move forward and progress into the future, you know? And so far in human history, the progression and advancement of technology and also of society could not be stopped by, you know, let's say, conservative people who wanted to like live in the past because they have like a nostalgic view of the past or whatever. And we're kind of like at that point as well, where people really try to hold on to that. But we have to, you know, progress into the future and advance into the future. So when it comes down to technology and society.
And grant universities. All these little states started building institutes of higher education to educate average people, but also to be pushing scientific understanding of agriculture. But here's the other progress that was going on. It was technology. It was only after the war that America blew out like 175,000 miles of rail and essentially stitched the entire continent together with this steel-based rails. And essentially we reinvented America in 25 years. And here's the even crazier thing though. You go back another 80 years, we did it again.
Oh. Now look at this.
1787 to about 1810, 1815, we had created what is America. One way to understand what was happening in America at that time was it was part of a bigger part of Western Europe, in particular an extension of Britain, which was going through the Enlightenment at the time. The Enlightenment is essentially a fundamental system change.
We really got to watch some more history videos on this channel because I'm so interested about this stuff, but I just don't know anything about it, period, basically. Like, I obviously know about like the founding fathers and how this all played out, like roughly, but it would be nice to watch like some historic videos together with you guys and maybe, you know, talk about it a little bit. That would be awesome. Because we can also learn something together a little bit.
Feudal society, kind of dominated by the Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff, into essentially what we would now consider the modern world. And they invented 6 huge things that we still are working within today. Now, the reason I'm kind of saying that is that had world historic implications. That was a building of a civilization that we essentially invented, we humans, but we Western Europe, in basically a space of 120 years. The forward motion of innovation, essentially from the West, was coming with those crazy-ass Americans who had this wide open continent to spread it to. And that is what America's role has been vis-a-vis the West in every one of those epochs. I'm arguing we have one more crank at that wheel with the arrival of 3 world historic changes that are happening around us today. And the most obvious one...
And I wonder who is holding us back right now.
is the arrival of artificial intelligence.
ChatGPT. Maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't, then get ready, because this promises to be the viral sensation that could completely reset how we do things.
The arrival of generative AI, with the arrival of ChatGPT 3.5 in November of 2022, I think we're going to see that as a world historic moment. I think people will look back on that is the starting gun of what will be understood as the age of AI. And I use age in a very explicit way, which is when you talk about a different age that humans enter, like, oh, the humans, you know, entered the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. I mean, you're talking about essentially a fundamental game-changing technology, a breakthrough, a step change in our abilities, that once you cross that threshold, you don't go back. We're going to watch an explosion of amplification. The amplification of our mental powers with digital computers and now AI are going to be very similar to the amplification of our physical power.
But I think the problem with this at the moment is that we don't have the energy production to sustain it, and we use it in such like simplistic and stupid ways. Apart from obviously using like LLMs for like medical advancement or whatever, right? But we use it in such stupid ways, and it's so bloated as well at the moment that there might be like some kind of crash before we can like look forward into like some particular things that are good for us as a society, where we can use this technology in, you know, in ways that really help us and really benefit us, apart from creating some AI slop videos or whatever.
Powers that mechanical engines, initially by steam, created the prosperity and wealth of the world that we know now, where we're just going to say, holy shit, we had no idea this is the world we're in. This is the first time we have an energy source that is a technology, 100% a technology, not a commodity. We don't have to dig it up as coal. We don't have to tap into it as oil. Why is that important? Because once it's a technology, you can consistently drive down the cost. And there's a kind of a rule of thumb in manufacturing, which if you double the number of producing solar panels, you will come up with about...
I'm a huge fan. We have solar panels on our roof as well. Those things are fucking great, and I can only recommend it to all of you guys. They help tremendously. If you're young, the younger you are, the better, of course. It's an investment into your future. It takes years to obviously for them to, you know, bring in the value again with whilst you save energy for yourself, but it's definitely awesome to have those.
20% of a drop in cost.
Just on a small scale.
And this is the point. It's going to keep getting cheaper. And the same thing, flipping around to the same thing with electric cars. People think, well, electric cars are still expensive and whatever. You're not thinking this through, because battery technology is the same thing. That's in lithium batteries. We're now getting whole other generations of batteries, like solid state batteries, that essentially will be a next generation. But the point is, the forward motion of costs coming down on clean energies is just beginning. And when that happens, you're going to have what? Abundant, clean energy. Basically, right around the time that we essentially had our earliest breakthroughs on generative AI, which is about 15 years ago, we also had the big breakthrough in what they call CRISPR, which is we figured out a way to...
That's what I was talking about at the beginning, CRISPR, where you can just like change DNA or parts of like DNA or something, right? Or molecules in general, I believe.
And easily edit the genome of any living thing. And you just take one example. We now know how to take a cell, put it in a vat, and you can give it the same amino acids and the same kind of nutrients and the same things that a cow roaming around a field for like years chewing on grass would get those same nutrients, those same amino acids, and essentially would produce in their muscles the meat. That same thing can happen in a vat to actually grow the same cow cell into actual meat. Not like kind of meat, not like plant-based meat that's kind of like meat. It's meat. It's the same cell. It tastes exactly the same. And what's happened, we've only 25 years ago, it's like 2003 was the first time humans had ever cracked or understood the human genome. It took $3 billion and it took 15 years to do it. The cost of doing that from $3 billion had been driven down so far, it was 1,000.
It's so crazy what we can do, right? With enough money and brain power, we're like actually so smart. And just imagine we would have unlimited funding for science. You know, science is so cool. Like the fact that we can sit here, that you guys can watch this right now, and that we can like use our phones and everything. This is all scientific advancements, right? Thanks to science. And imagine we had unlimited funding and had like an unlimited amount of people as well who would just like pour in the work every day. We would be so far. We would live like a utopian society.
$1,000. It's now at the point where it's about $100. And eventually it's going to keep driving down to $50 or nothing. It's not just the same level, it is twice as fast. We can now essentially design these things for outcomes that we want to happen cheaply and easily.
So what's the conclusion?
So the technology story of today, AI, clean energies, even bioengineering, is kind of familiar at some level. The next several iterations here, though, I think is putting a bigger lens on what's going on today. And it gets us back to what we were describing as what's happening in America is a once in a year reinvention. And in fact, it's even possible that what's going on here is essentially the early days of building a 21st century civilization. And so when you think about that, you go beyond the technology. That's like the foundation. And so the next thing up, I think, from technologies, you start thinking, okay, well, what could you build with those technologies? What kind of an economy would you want to build? The economic system that the United States has been based on, that has worked for essentially the top 10% for sure, and certainly for the top 1%, has not been working for 80%. And it's gotten to the point where they just haven't had it. So as crazy as it sounds, we could be at a point in the world right now, in 2025, where we are watching the beginnings of a shift from financial capitalism, born and raised out of the Enlightenment, to essentially some version of a sustainable capitalism. We're going from a world of representative democracy, which was a brilliant move forward, to essentially a digital democracy. And we're also going to go from a world of nation states, which again was a great breakthrough from empires and colonies of the past, to some kind of global governance that coordinates the 10 billion people on this planet. That's the level of change I think we're actually heading into. That's the level of change I think your kids are going to be wrestling with, and that's the level of change I think America is going through now. And the quicker we start to wrap our heads around that challenge and the kind of scale of the invention we're up to, the better off we're all going to be.
But there are certainly, again, movements that don't want that, of course. They want to hold on to the old ways, basically. And it would be nice. Like, I would agree with all of that. I'd love to see that. I'd love, like, a fairer society. And I'd love, like, that we all come together as, like, a, rock that floats in space and create something for all of us. But it's going to be a long and hard way to go through. Oh, that's it? Then this is probably a good way, or a good couple of finishing words. Thanks for watching it with me, guys. That was a cool video. I hope that some of this shit comes true. That would be awesome. You can always help me by give these videos a like if you want, of course. I know this is reaction content and, you don't have to. I hope I can show you guys some cool videos that you haven't seen yet, and we can watch more together. Thanks for watching this one. Original video down below as always. Love you, say it back. Tschüss, 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 tschüss.